Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. I'm sorry that these haven't been live lately. I know that people really enjoy the live thing where they can interact with me and the guests and ask questions, but it was really easy to do that during lockdown because everybody had tons of time. But now it almost seems like everybody, myself included, is trying to make up for lost time. And we're all so busy these days. So because of busy schedules, I've had to do a ton of pre-recorded episodes recently. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm still trying to crank out the episodes though, because they give me a lot of joy and I really hope they give you some too. And as always, I'm so happy to welcome my friend and my frequent collaborator, Marion Davies biographer and film historian, Lara Gabrielle.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yes, it is always fun to hang out with you. Any excuse to hang out with you.
Yes, it's very nice. And, as we were saying before, things are pretty bad at the moment. And I was thinking, like whether or not I wanted to do this, because it's so, it's been rough. And I thought, you know what, I want to do this because I don't want to let the terrorists destroy what we have, and what in our lives, and otherwise they win. So I'm here and I'm happy to be here and very happy to be making Katharine Hepburn's brownies today.
Thank you. And this whole project honestly was born in adversity because I was gonna do this, but then when lockdown happened, I was so depressed. I was terrified. I was alone. And I just thought, maybe I should do this because it'll give me something creative and enjoyable and fun for me and hopefully for other people. So I think,
that's the whole purpose of this,
Yeah,
that's the whole purpose of how Hollywood Kitchen got started, to bring people a little bit of joy. So we need some joy at the moment.
Exactly. And we've overcome a lot of crazy times and adversity. So yeah, it's just something fun to hopefully lift people's spirits.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, Katharine Hepburn brownies, as the woman herself, are the gift that will never stop giving to the world. The recipe itself is fantastic. And I think the first full episode I did on them, it was after Thanksgiving a year or two ago. I had a bunch of extra cranberries left over, so I kind of threw them in the mix. And that dark chocolate with that burst cranberry was just phenomenal. And it made them so creamy and not creamy, gooey and delicious. And the tart with the cranberry, the sweet chocolate.
Yeah. And if anybody has not had Katharine Hepburn's brownies before, gooey is the way to describe them.
Gooey.
That is the descriptor for Katharine Hepburn's brownies. And unfortunately, my batch today came out a little bit less gooey than I'm used to. I think maybe I need to add one more egg or something.
Okay.
But yeah, they're always good. They're always just so incredibly tasty. It's so simple, this recipe.
Yes. And what I thought was, well, if they worked that well with cranberries, I'm currently on my autumnal pumpkin spice frenzy, which is kind of an annual thing. And I started thinking, I wonder what would happen if I put a bunch of pumpkin spice and pumpkin puree in the brownies. So I looked at some comparable recipes, and so let's get these started first. So what I did, I took 1/2 cup of pumpkin puree from Trader Joe's, and I put 1 1/3 teaspoon of pumpkin spice in it, and I've stirred it up really nicely. But what I'm going to do is make the brownie batter, put it in the dish, and then I'm going to put this on top of it and kind of swirl it through the mix. So is that how you did it too?
Yeah, actually, I didn't do the pumpkin because I didn't have time to go get pumpkin. So I just made the regular Katharine Hepburn brownies with almonds though. Ooh. So yes. So I didn't do the pumpkins, but the almonds are very good.
Yeah, I used walnuts, but this is the great thing about this recipe is how versatile it is. What I'm thinking is maybe Christmas we'll do another one and just crush up a bunch of candy canes and throw it in the brownies and see how many ways we can buy it.
It's pretty versatile.
It is. And by the way, this recipe is legit. This is definitely a proven thing that Katharine Hepburn did make. So we know that's true.
Yep.
It's been written up in the New York Times. It's kind of one of the most widely easy to find celebrity recipes online.
Yeah.
I found it in this, not only in the New York Times cooking section, but also this really good book, American Cookie. If you
Ooh,
don't have
that's
this
great.
book, and there's an American cake too. It's really good because not only does it give you recipes, it gives you a history of the recipe itself and also a history of the brownie itself. So if you're a history geek and a food lover like we are, this is a terrific book and it's not too expensive to find.
Yeah, that's great. I don't have that book.
Yeah, I'll have to get you a copy. You'll love it. You will love it.
Yeah.
So
Great.
we preheated the oven to, I believe it says
325.
325. Okay. So I'm going to start out here on my hot plate. I've got my stick of butter, which I'm going to put in here. You need a stick of butter. You need 2 ounces of unsweetened baking chocolate. So I should probably cut this chocolate up a little bit. It might melt more smoothly if it's kind of cut up somewhat.
I use just regular butter and cocoa powder.
Oh, that works too. That works.
Yeah. It works pretty well, and you just stir it until it's, until it's smooth.
Okay, so I am now going to start that process. And the other ingredients we will be adding to this once it melts is some, let's see, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. I believe this is about about a 1/4 cup of flour, a teaspoon of salt, a cup of sugar, and roughly about 1 cup of walnuts and 2 eggs. So right now, while I wait for the chocolate and butter to melt, okay, Lara, if you met someone that had never heard anything about Katharine Hepburn, which I can't fathom a world, but it might happen. Believe it or not, last week I was giving a private nighttime cemetery tour to this group that had hired me to do it. And they were very, very, very young influencers for this airline out of Mexico City. When I got them to Judy Garland, one of them turned to me and they go, wait a minute. What is this vaudeville you keep talking about? What does that mean?
Oh boy.
That's exactly what I said. I just kind of stood there very dumbfounded. So it does often occur to me that I kind of tend to assume everybody knows what we know, and they might not. So if you had to explain the brilliant, glorious phenomenon that is Katharine Hepburn to someone who had never heard of her, what would you say?
Well, I would probably start with, she was, and start with the generals and say she was an actress, made her debut in the early 1930s and had an extremely long career into the 90s. And she was known for being very ahead of her time in just about every way imaginable. I mean, she grew up that way. Like she grew up with a suffragist mother and a father who was very forward thinking on, disease and that kind of thing. And she infused that progressivism into her roles, and into her persona, her on-screen and off-screen persona. She was kind of what you see is what you get kind of person. It's kind of, if you see a Katharine Hepburn interview, it's like a person that you see on the screen. It's like she was the same person on screen and off.
Yeah, and one of the famous lines, we know this line very well. Katharine Hepburn did not like wearing dresses or skirts. She wore pants a lot in her private life. And Barbara Walters very famously asked Katharine Hepburn when she was going to wear a skirt again. And she said, at your funeral.
I'll wear it at your funeral.
I love the story.
She had one skirt.
One skirt.
Yeah, and I have one.
I love the story about how apparently one of the studio execs at RKO did not approve of her wearing pants, and someone stole the pants out of her dressing room. And instead of being straight and wearing a skirt, she just marched around the set in her underwear, demanding to know where her pants were.
Yep, no shame.
I believe that story. I firmly believe that story.
Yeah. And of course we can't forget, if we're introducing somebody new to Katharine Hepburn, we can't forget that she was long associated with Spencer Tracy,
Mhm.
you know, as romantic and on-screen partners. He was married. She had been married once, and it didn't last very long. But they had this long relationship. Yeah, and she was with him when he died. So there's that part of the story as well that is important.
I find there to be, let me interrupt you really quick. The chocolate is all melted now and it looks and smells fabulous. So I'm going to start adding in the sugar, the salt, the vanilla extract, and the eggs. One thing that I've always thought was interesting about the Spencer Tracy relationship, they made 9 films together. And it seems that for a feminist and a strong-willed woman like Katharine Hepburn, she kind of submersed herself in him in terms of whatever he liked, she liked. He kind of like whatever he wanted, she kind of changed herself to please him, which seems like such a contradiction.
Yeah, it seems contrary to what we think about with Katharine Hepburn.
And I mean, Spencer Tracy was an alcoholic and he had a terrible problem with alcoholism. And it's kind of amazing to think kind of what she put up with when there's a lot of people would have, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of people I know when you talk to them about the relationship between Hearst and Marion, they compare it to the relationship between Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, which, you know, I can see to a certain extent. You know, they, of course, Spencer Tracy was married, and Hearst was married, and they had this long, loving relationship. And they were together when, you know, Kate and Spencer were together when Spencer died, and Marion was with Hearst when he died. So, you know, there's some similarities there, and yeah, I think it's kind of worth exploring.
Yeah, and it's really amazing to me. I don't know if this was Hughes telling the media to back off or what, but the press did not bother them, which is kind of amazing that they were left alone, especially back in that time.
Well, one thing that I learned sort of when I was working on Marion is that there was sort of a moratorium for a long time on printing people's names together in the press unless they showed up in court. You know, so there was an avoidance of scandal unless there was a court case. So so this was, you know, before the tabloids and, you know, all of that came to be. So I think that probably fed into it as well, that the press kind of left them alone.
But they were magic on screen. Like that is undeniable. Their physical attraction to each other and also their wit and their chemistry with each other too. It's kind of like Bogey and Bacall, like it just practically jumps off the screen, and anybody that can sees these two people just falling madly in love.
Yeah, one thing that I think is an interesting comparison between Bogey and Bacall and Kate and Spence is that Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy movies are good. Like they're good movies. Bogey and Bacall's movies, about half of them you don't really watch for the plot. You know, I mean, probably more than half of them, probably maybe all of them. You don't watch for the plot. What was that?
They only made 4 together, I
believe. Right. Yeah, I think you're right. But they, yeah, I mean, The Big Sleep, To Have and Have Not. Passage of those you certainly watch for the plot.
And Dark Passage and Key Largo.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the chemistry is definitely there in both cases, but it's just Spencer and Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, they definitely were in kind of a league of their own. You know, because they did so many other genres too. It wasn't just like one genre. And
they were both established actors individually when they made their first movie together.
Exactly, because Bacall, I think, made her debut with Bogarts.
Right.
That's totally different. You know, one thing I think would be so interesting, Lara, and I'm not the person to write this, but I hope someone does. Like a history of Hollywood power couples, the career dynamics, the gender dynamics, the financial dynamics, the pressures of fame. Did they stay together? Did
Yeah.
they divorce, and why? All the way from like Pickford and Fairbanks up to like modern day. I think that'd be such a fascinating like case study, you know?
Yeah, I wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal when my book came out about books about Hollywood power couples.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I chose like Kendra Bean's book on Vivian Lee as a sort of a piece on Vivian Lee and Laurence Olivier. And then I chose Tracy Gossel's First King of Hollywood for Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. Yeah, so I think it's a field worth exploring.
Especially today with our kind of looking at gender dynamics, power dynamics. I mean, I think that would be, someone needs to write that book out there, because there's definitely
Yeah.
a lot of interesting material to kind of mine. And
Mhm.
I read a book a few years ago called Furious Love about the Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton. And I thought it was going to be kind of a Tawdry Beach read, but it was actually so poignant. I found myself in tears at the end, and I got so much more out of that book than I ever anticipated. But it was interesting, the ups and downs, like when she won for Virginia Woolf and he didn't.
Right.
Or when certain things would happen and the imbalance of the power between them, and just the pressures of being in the public eye at that level. I mean, that would be
Absolutely.
brutal for anybody, much less people like
Pe-
them.
Yeah,
So,
two people who were like the king and queen of Hollywood and acting in general.
yeah, and how they navigate all these different changes that kind of happen across their relationship between either sound coming or TV coming or getting older, or, you know, so
Mhm.
many different things that life can throw at people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I think one thing that I really love about Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy is you see them in Woman of the Year, and then you see them in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and they're not afraid to be older. Neither of them, and it's really beautiful. And that famous look that Spencer Tracy gives, or the way that they look at each other at the end of the movie, it's
Mhm.
just, I mean, it brings me to tears just thinking about it.
And I heard that like Hepburn had to, like, they had to financially like sign off on something because Tracy was in such bad health when they made that film. They didn't know if he'd live to finish it. And
Right, and he almost didn't.
wow.
Yeah.
One thing I would say that I think characterizes both of them is they were fearless. You know, they
Yes.
seemed to have fear, or maybe they didn't know what it was. I don't know, but they just
Yeah,
went
I
through
know.
life.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because Kate, at least, was a shy woman. I mean, she didn't like the spotlight. She didn't like to go to parties. She didn't like to go to award ceremonies. Um, and so there was sort of a fear, you know, in her private life, but it certainly didn't reflect on the screen, you know.
All right, so the base here of the brownie, the chocolate, and all these ingredients are melted in here. I'm going to pour it in the pan now. Oh, it smells so good. Oh my gosh.
I'm looking at the comments.
Why isn't there a perfume that smells like chocolate?
I don't know. I'm looking at the comments here and seeing if anybody has
Okay.
any questions or anything like that. Danny says, "Oi, that look and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner has never not made me cry." Yeah, I agree. Yep. Wait, did she add the nut? Did you add the nuts, Carrie?
I'm adding the pumpkin puree, and then I'm adding the nuts, and then I'm swirling them together. So, okay, so I've got the pan with the brownie mix. I'm taking the pumpkin puree. I'm gonna take a knife here and kind of swirl bits of it through the chocolate so it's kind of distributed, if you will.
And it says there are 18 comments, but I'm only seeing like 5. So something's happening here.
Oh, technology.
Oh, technology, indeed.
And what phase of Kate career now that I really always enjoy is her super early films.
Oh my
It's-
gosh. I'm looking at
Are you there?
Sorry. I'm here. Yeah, sorry. I was pulling up the Facebook page to see
Okay.
to see our comments, but and then it started talking at me. So oh well.
When a star becomes a star, like when you see that moment where you're like, yep, there they are, that's them, kind of them forming on screen their persona for the first time, or finding their way for the first real time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I love Morning Glory for that very reason, because
Yeah.
scenes in that film where you're like, yeah, that's, she's arrived, that's it. And
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of enjoy that phase of people's careers in general, kind of seeing that when they went from, someone that was starting out to when they really found their footing on screen.
So Anna Wong says, hello, I love all of her work, but one of my absolute favorites is in the end of her career on Golden Pond. I agree.
Oh yeah.
I love that movie. And again, talk about not being afraid to be older.
Right.
I mean, it's just so beautiful.
And just to watch her and Henry Fonda, who frankly should have won an Oscar a billion times over.
Yes. And it's so funny because that was their first time working together. That was Katharine Hepburn and Henry Fonda's first time working together. So the story goes that Katharine Hepburn arrived on set and Henry Fonda was there already. And she strides up to him in her Katharine Hepburn way and sticks out her hands like, well, it's about time.
You do such a good impression of her. Oh my God. Love it.
I mean, I've watched her enough, and I love the later interviews. The interview where she rearranges the furniture on Dick Cavett. That Cavett.
Strikes as she would have been the funnest person on like planet Earth to have known and been friends with.
Yeah, I think it would not have been an easy friendship. She had her ways.
I know she was friends with Laura Harding, the actress. Like, who were some of the really close friendships in Kate Hepburn's life?
Well, she was really close to Vivien Leigh, and she was really close to Judy Garland, and she helped them both a lot.
Wow. Because I have a famous story about Mayer calling her and saying, look, you got to go help Judy.
Yeah. And she jumps over all the hedges and gets into her yard.
Yeah.
And tells her to go swimming, of course.
I think Judy was past the go swimming phase of
I agree. But apparently that was her advice for everybody, to go swimming.
Oh my gosh, that is funny. Okay, so I've swirled in everything here.
Oh, that looks good.
Top, that would be bad. Okay. Now I'm going to add the nuts. I'm going to kind of sprinkle some walnuts, but again, this recipe is so versatile. You could use whatever you wanted, honestly. Pumpkin seeds, nuts, a lot of different things. I'm choosing.
Yeah, I used almonds.
Yeah, I'm sure that was great. I'm choosing to use walnuts here. And then just sprinkle these throughout.
Sorry about my cat. He's yelling at the door.
Come here, let me feed you.
That's okay. All right, and I'll pop this into the oven, but I did a test bake earlier today, and this is how they turned out at the end of the day, right here.
Yeah, those look really good. Mine kind of didn't turn out that well. I mean, they were okay, but.
And I'm now going to eat one on camera because I want one. My entire place has smelled like warm chocolate and pumpkin spice all day, and it's kind of been heaven.
Feels like fall. It said it feels like fall.
Several of my friends are going to be reaping the benefits because I certainly can't eat all of these by myself.
Yeah.
Katharine Hepburn
Probably could, but I don't want to.
What are some of your absolute favorite Katharine Hepburn performances?
Well, we talked about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. We talked about Morning Glory a little bit. One of the things that I like about Katharine Hepburn is that she really could do anything. Like, she wore her characters very lightly, And she was always kind of Katharine Hepburn, no matter what she did, but she also was very skilled. I love Woman of the Year.
Hmm.
I really love, let me see what else. Pat and Mike is sweet. I mean, the movies she did with Tracy are really special. So going through the years here, Bringing Up Baby, I have a fondness for. Of course, The Philadelphia Story, one of the most sophisticated scripts, I think, of all time.
She and Cary Grant were magic.
Yeah.
I mean, just magic. And if
Yeah, but that script, man, I mean, that was a powerhouse script.
Mm.
Yeah. And then, we talked about Woman of the Year, and let me see what else. Summertime I find hilarious because, I mean, aside from her falling into the canal in Venice and all that, at one year at the TCM Fest, they showed it, and I had never seen it before. And a friend and I were sitting, in the theater, and she at one point said, "I'm from Ohio." And she's supposed to be from Ohio. The character is supposed to be from Ohio. I don't know whose ridiculous idea that was, but she said in her Connecticut accent, that she was from Ohio, and we burst out laughing. And I swear we nearly got kicked out of the theater.
There's many things, but
Funny.
Ohio is not one of them.
Ohio is not one of them. I'm sorry. No matter how good of an actress you are, Kate, you will never be from Ohio.
I'm still buying her in working class roles too, because she just has this to the manner born upper crust kind of personality and bearing, that it's hard to see her playing like someone that's poor or working class type of person.
Yeah, I mean, I think she could do it, but it's not where she was comfortable, probably. Yeah. I'm gonna look to see if there are any comments. I'm gonna mute myself this time because
so I think I had a big glass of milk right now. Oh my gosh. Oh, mine turned out so gooey and so delicious. Oh my gosh. So, and seeing her films as many of these stars, seeing them on the big screen is always great too. I remember my freshman year of college, I got to see Holiday, Bringing Up Baby, The Philadelphia Story, all on the big screen. And oh my gosh, does that make an impact? I mean, TV and home video is streaming, that stuff's great and all, but to me, just nothing tops that big screen.
Yeah. So Danny is talking about Stage Door, which I also love because of that astronomical cast.
I should have gotten calla lilies for my kitchen table today in honor of that film.
Yes, that would be great. Such a strange.
One thing I love about that film, it's sort of, apparently it was kind of taken from actual conversations and even maybe situations that happened in those kind of boarding houses.
Yeah.
Very fascinated by that world, because for a lot of women at the time, boarding houses were one of the few ways they could kind of be an entrepreneur or have their own little business. And also for a lot of young women starting out, that was a place where they could live, a place where they could kind of have some sort of a stable, start to their lives. So there's something about those houses that just really intrigues me. And that story,
Yeah.
all these female personalities that are all striving to be in show business and throw them all into one boarding house. It's just such a good film. And Ginger Rogers, Lucille Ball. I mean,
yeah, it's such a cast. I mean, I think of like the Hollywood Studio Club, right? It's sort of like that.
What was the New York equivalent? It was like Stage Door Club or something like that.
Oh, maybe somebody in the comments knows. There was one, but I forget the name.
There was one for sure.
Yeah. But just the other night, a friend of mine and I we watched Hollywood Canteen. And the New York equivalent of that one was Stage Door Canteen. So.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I just kind of feel this fascination with those places in general. I think they're kind of very interesting. And it's such a good film early on for her,
Yeah. Jack Priest says Ann Miller was so cute in it. I say Stage Door. The story Eve Arden told. Ann Miller was 14 years old in Stage Door. Is that the most ridiculous thing?
It amazes me how poised and together a lot of these women were at such an incredibly young age.
Yeah,
It floors me, you know.
yeah.
It's really amazing to think about. And another thing, of course, is Katharine Hepburn was very entrepreneurial. For example, in the late 30s, she was apparently branded box office poison along with
Mhm.
other top stars. And she went to Broadway and wound up doing the Philadelphia Story. It was a smash. And
Mhm.
she got the rights to that play because she knew when Hollywood came calling, any actress would kill for the role of Tracy Lord. So Hepburn felt that if she owned the rights, then they'd have to hire her. So that was an incredible business move on her part as well. I'm not sure how much Howard Hughes helped her acquire the rights or not, but
Yeah.
we do know she got the rights and she got the role too.
Yeah. And sorry, I was just thinking, the sort of the progression between Holiday, because she also did Holiday on Broadway. Holiday and Philadelphia Story, that Holiday is probably one of the most underrated movies that I've ever seen. I think that movie is so darling and charming, and I want everybody to see it because I think it's just so lovely. Yeah, so that's one of my all-time favorites too.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like a lot of her contemporaries, like say Joan Crawford and Barbara Stanwyck, Katharine was able to change with the times. She was able to
Mhm.
kind of evolve from the 1930s into the 1940s, into the 1950s, into the 1960s, and kind of cross those divides when a lot of people couldn't, because that's not
Yeah,
an easy thing, to do.
right. And I think part of that, at least with Katharine Hepburn, is that, as we were talking about before, that she wore her roles so lightly. I mean, she was always kind of herself in everything she did. Joan Crawford, I think, was so invested in being a star that she tried really hard to be a chameleon and change her image, transform her image as the years went on. Katharine Hepburn, I think, probably didn't try very hard. I think she just did it, was able to do it because of the way that she approached her acting.
That's true. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Katharine did a lot of schlock later in life, because not that they could control it. Obviously, you're kind of at the mercy of what you get offered. But it seems like a lot of them had these periods where they did the Grand Guignol or just the really bad movies just so they could keep working. And
Betty Davis. Yep. And Straight Jacket.
yeah, we love Betty and Joan very much around here, but you kind of think like, oh God, I wish she wouldn't have done that one. So like Kate didn't fall into that trap, if you will.
Right. And I think that there's probably no, I don't want to fault Betty Davis for
No, me
doing
neither.
like
Me neither. I
Nola.
tried never to judge, but
Yeah, or Olivia de Havilland, or any of those people who did that kind of work. I think that especially for women, who were getting older, they needed to keep working, and this was the way that they could keep working. And so it's like, yeah, they had to do what they had to do. This is a job. But yeah, I think you're right that Katharine Hepburn didn't really do that.
what a different path.
Yeah, different path. Yeah, Ruth says Joan was on a mission. Kate was about the art of acting. Yeah, I mean, not that Joan wasn't, right? I mean, Joan was too, about the art of acting. It's just that she also had this star image. She was a brand,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think Kate was a brand in the same way.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing to think about too is one time a friend of mine is an agent, and one time I was telling him, we were talking about some actress, and I said, oh, why would she choose to do that bad part? And he said, Carrie, here's what you don't understand. For except all but like say the 1%, you take what you're offered. It's not a billion roles land at your doorstep and you can just pick anything you want. It doesn't always work like that.
And of course, with the studio system too, with these actresses operating under the studio system, they kind of had no choice. They had to take what they were offered, or or, be suspended. Yeah, so there's some people, of course, buck the system, like think Olivia. And then you could also say that Kate bucked the system too by not being attached to a studio. Like, there were a couple stars like that, right? Like Barbara Stanwyck wasn't attached to a studio.
Carol
But
Lombard kind of drifted around to many different.
Carol Lombard too, yeah. There were a few people who weren't, and I think that might have been considered a risk in some ways. But if you could make it work for yourself, then there you go.
Yeah.
But I think some people, I think most people preferred the security of the studio system. It seems so weird to say that because we think of the studio system as such a bad thing now, but I know that a lot of stars felt that they were working, that they were assured a job while being attached to a studio.
Well, in the Great Depression too, it must have been so darn scary, and job security was probably hard to come by.
Yeah.
So if you had it.
Oh, my father, Stanley Kramer, made Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I'm interviewed, contributed voiceover in the Netflix doc. Call Me Kate. Oh, good. I'll have to check that out.
Yes.
Call Me Kate. Have you seen it yet?
No.
Sorry. No, maybe Katharine can say in the comments when it's coming out if she knows.
And Kate did lots of theater throughout her career too. I really respect her for that as well, because probably didn't pay nearly what the movies did, but it seems to me that she probably felt very artistically fulfilled doing that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
51 comments. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, people are very engaged.
Let's see.
It's already out. Danny says he enjoyed that documentary very much.
Oh wow. Oh, Katharine Kramer's following us. Oh my gosh, Katharine.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you.
It's fantastic. It's been on Netflix since May. Okay.
Oh wow. I will have to check this out. Hopefully it being on Netflix will get a lot of new people to see it.
I hope so.
Oh, which maybe some people will stumble on it that might not have known Katharine Hepburn before. That would be nice.
Right. And it's so much better, to have a documentary than, let's just say, we won't name that Marilyn Monroe movie that came out.
So Lara, okay, so let me ask you this. If somebody was brand spanking new to the world of Kate Hepburn,
yes,
and had to pick, okay, this is the movie you start, because I get this question a lot on the cemetery tour, like, okay, I've never seen a movie with blank, where do I start? And you don't want to start them off with a super early film, because then they're going to be like, you kind of want to find like what I call the signature movie, like the career defining film. And so for Katharine Hepburn, what would you tell people if they had clean slate person?
Yeah, I think that I would probably narrow it down a little, because she spanned so many genres.
Right? It's hard to do that with her. Geez.
Yeah. I would ask people like, okay, are you into Westerns? Are you into comedies? Are you into, steamy love dramas, and then go from there, because she made a lot of good movies in a lot of different genres. Like if people like screwball comedy, I would definitely send them to Bringing Up Baby, but then some people don't like Bringing Up Baby. I would say The Philadelphia Story is pretty safe.
Oh, that's like one of my all-time favorite. Like if I was like Desert Island and someone's like, okay, Carrie, you get like 5 movies, I would definitely be like, okay, you better put The Philadelphia Story on that list. Like I love that movie.
Yeah, it's pretty perfect. Like I can't find much fault with it at all.
It's funny how she really wanted Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy, and it's kind of funny to imagine what it would have been like with those two. But it was like a movie casting choice or miracle, really, that she got Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant. It's like, oh my God, you've got 3 people that are just astounding, all at the peak of their careers, all together in the same movie. And it's just, oh, that's such a good film.
Yeah. And I think that it's sort of central Kate, whereas something like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is a real ensemble cast.
Definitely.
You've got, not that Philadelphia Story isn't. You've got
driving force and
all of that. Yes, but in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, she's not. I wouldn't consider her the main character in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner necessarily. So, right. And if people liked, I don't know, like the romancy drama stuff, I would probably recommend to them, you know, I probably wouldn't recommend Woman of the Year, to be honest with you, just because of that painful ending. But you know, one of her Spencer Tracy movies, maybe.
All right.
Yeah. What about you?
Oh God, if I had to introduce somebody, a blank slate person, I would easily say the Philadelphia Story.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe bet.
It's just peak Hepburn. That's what I would describe. But okay, so say, let's go the opposite end of the spectrum here. Say you met somebody and like they were like us, they geek out over the stuff, they eat, sleep, drink, and breathe, classic Hollywood. But then you said, you know, if they said to you, tell me a Hepburn movie that may be under the radar, maybe is not nearly as beloved or as viewed or is seen as often, that might have escaped your notice. Because when someone has a 6-decade career, there's going to be stuff that slips through the cracks. That's just the way.
I mean, Holiday. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, I think that Holiday is so charming and lovely that, and people don't really see it that much. I mean, I think it's getting a little bit more airtime than it has in the past,
Mhm.
but every time I see it, just like, oh, I love that movie. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, I sort of figured, Catherine, that Katharine Hepburn was your namesake when you said, you know, that your father was Stanley Kramer. It's like, your name is Catherine with an A. And yeah, sort of figured that. That's great. So that says a lot about Kate. I mean, that says a lot about Katharine Hepburn, that Stanley Kramer wanted to name his kid after her.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And off screen, I mean, she really sounds like an extraordinary person in her personal life as well, because sometimes, and we've talked about this a lot on this show and other places, sometimes there's a giant disconnect between who the person was on film and who the person is in their private lives. And sometimes that private image can be very different and even not as good. So, but like with Katharine Hepburn, it seems like, as you said earlier in our conversation, she's kind of what you see is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
And she's exactly what you expect that she is.
Right. I mean, that's the way it seems anyway, when you see interviews with her and things like that, and stories from various people.
And she seems like she had such a sense of fun. Like, I love the image of her on the skateboard.
Yeah.
I think you sent me a meme or something of Katharine Hepburn, like listening to rock music on a golf cart or something.
Yes.
Like,
Yes. That's from that the little movie that was made, I forget the name of it now, but where she talks about her life, talks about Spencer Tracy and
All About Me.
All About Me. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, that's from that. Ruth says I would want to meet her. I'd want to meet her too. I love the sign, when she's holding flowers, smiling in front of a sign that says, "Please go away."
Like, she kind of sounds like she loved New England so much more than Hollywood. And that was kind of her private enclave, her private world, where people weren't that often invited, where she kind of had a whole place to herself.
Yeah, I think that house just came up for sale a couple years ago. Remember that?
Yes. Every time these houses come up for sale, I'm always like, all right, Lara, how many of us would it take to make that mortgage? Like, I'll do the dishes if you can handle the,
Yeah.
the windows or whatever. Like, how many of us fans would it take to make one of these things work?
It's like we'll make a little kibbutz, on Katharine Hepburn's old house.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It just seems
Ruth
awesome.
says I love that she loved to ride her bike, and I think that that's probably what kept her going for so long. Dying at 96.
That's a very, very long life.
Yeah, especially someone who was born in 1907.
And her record still stands. I mean, Meryl Streep eclipsed her in the Oscar nomination department. Katharine had a total of 12. I think Meryl Streep's at like 21 now. But Katharine is still the most honored actress in Oscar history with 4 Best Actress Oscar wins, and that still stands today.
Yeah. Meryl Streep has 3.
Mm-hmm.
Ingrid Bergman has 3.
Mm-hmm. I think Frances McDormand might have 3 by now.
Yeah, maybe. The Fenwick kibbutz. Yeah, Danny Miller wants to come to the Fenwick kibbutz.
Yes, we need that. A lot of us would get along as we had, everybody knew how much rent they had to pay and what chores they had to do, as long as there were ground rules from the outset. I think
Yeah.
a commune of classic movie buffs could be a thing.
Yeah, I think that would be a venerable institution.
A classic Hollywood version of the Golden Girls.
Yeah, we would be something to be dealt with, that's for sure.
Yes. And she's just, again, I just love her so much. She's just so,
She was so herself. I mean, that's really it. She was so unapologetically herself.
and she was such a nonconformist. I mean, she just kind of did her, as they would say today, or whatever. She was her own person. She wasn't trying to be like someone else. She wasn't trying to manufacture an image or anything like that. And I think there's so many reasons for her enduring appeal, because some of the stars, there's so many stars that have been totally forgotten today. And then there's others that are remembered either for their scandals or for their tragic death or for whatever the reason. But I think Kate, ultimately her legacy is in her films, but which, I mean, they all are, but I think also in just the way she kind of went through life, you know, with such an incredible sense of freedom and independence that, you know, was in a lot of ways ahead of her time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she was a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Jack Fields is a true original, a true authentic. It's that as well.
Exactly.
That too. And
Look what you said. Oh, yeah. Jack Priest is bringing up the Barbara Walters skirt thing again. I love what she said to Barbara Walters when asked about her pants. Oh, wear them to your funeral. Yeah. Or yeah, wear the skirt, right?
some of these interviews, I'm kind of amazed that she did, actually, you know?
Yeah, I think she was a little bit more interview friendly toward the end, you know, like in the 80s.
Yeah, because I couldn't have imagined her in previous eras being like, yeah, I'll sit down at your talk show, or, you know.
Yeah, no, she didn't do that. She didn't go on What's My Line. She didn't, you know, do all the things that.
If I'm wrong, anybody, I don't think she ever showed up to collect any of her Best Actress Academy Awards either.
I think her only appearance at the Oscars was that one year when she presented.
Because she didn't seem to feel like the awards themselves were the thing. Like she just wanted to do the work and go home. And I don't think the awards meant anything to her in that way.
I don't think so. Yeah. Ruth says, I'm curious as to what she would have done in life if not for acting. That's a really good question. I don't know. What do you think, Carrie?
See her maybe getting into politics, like her mom was a suffragette. So maybe for advocating for women's rights in a very early time, I could kind of envision something like that, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like medicine, even. Her father was a doctor, you know. Yeah.
Smart woman. So the sky was the limit, really.
Yeah. Yeah, she was, although she didn't have such an easy time at school, apparently. Like that seemed to be you know, she scraped by, barely graduated college, you know. But I mean, that doesn't mean anything, but yeah. Yeah, she I think she was kind of a dreamer. You know, and of course she had a difficult time as a kid. I mean, I can't even imagine what it was like for her to have found her brother, you know.
For those who don't know, tell them the story.
Yeah, so her brother, I mean, it's pretty gruesome, but she essentially found her brother dead, who, you know, committed suicide essentially. We think, right? I mean, there are all kinds of like theories about maybe it wasn't a suicide, maybe he was trying to trick or something, but she found him and he was the center of her world, and she went way into herself after that and became even more shy than she was before, introverted. Her parents took her out of school. She was homeschooled for a long time. Yeah, I mean, it was a trauma that stayed with her for life. She even adopted her brother's birthday as her own. And yeah, so it was a really, really big.
I mean, grief and trauma are very hard to deal with in any era, but I wonder back then if they had the kind of things that we have today, if they had support groups or they had therapy or they had some sort of support infrastructure for someone that was dealing with something like that. I'm kind of guessing they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that wasn't something that people that people thought much of back then.
Can't even imagine. But she was born into a very interesting family, though, with her mom and her dad, and they're both of their incredibly dynamic personalities and careers. And because it seems to me like a lot of classic stars came from broken families with extreme poverty and hardship. And Kate, that really wasn't her background.
Yeah, I mean, except for the situation with her brother.
Yeah, exactly.
Which might very well have driven the acting. You know, you inhabit a different body, a different person.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
What do you think of Cate Blanchett's performance in The Aviator?
Mm-hmm.
Did you like it?
Oh, what did I think of it?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah.
But when I saw it, I thought it was quite good.
Yeah, I did too. I read a book about Howard Hughes by Richard Hack right before I saw the movie. I finished it and I felt very frustrated that there was a lot of stuff they could have put in the movie that actually would have made it a better movie, in my humble opinion, about Howard Hughes's life that they left out. But I thought Kate stole that movie from everybody else. And I think my favorite scene was when she sits Leo DiCaprio down as Howard Hughes and she says, "Howard, we're not like other people. You and I."
Yeah.
I was like, hey, there's the Oscar right there. That's it. I mean, that was just such a powerful scene where she kind of tells him that you've got to understand where you don't fit in. And oh, that was so good.
Yeah, Danny says, I do love Cate Blanchett's performance of her in The Aviator. I always call that Catherine's 5th Oscar.
Yeah, and I think I could be wrong here, but I think that's the first time someone's won an Oscar for playing someone who's won an Oscar.
Yeah, and Catherine Kramer says, I hosted an event for Cate Blanchett before she won the Oscar.
Oh,
that's cool.
Wow.
That's
awesome.
Awesome.
I have to geek out about Cate Blanchett for a minute because she is one of my favorite contemporary actresses. And, I'm a big Lon Chaney fan also.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I think Kate is the most versatile performer that we have today on film. Because, I mean, if you think about it, Katharine Hepburn, Catherine the Great, Bob Dylan. I mean, think about the roles she has played and the range she has showed. Show me anybody else that has displayed that kind of range. I don't think there is any.
Yeah, I mean, I think that she's probably the sort of second Meryl Streep,
Yeah, she can be beautiful, she can be unattractive, she can be rich, she can be poor, she can be foreign, she can be American. Like it's almost like she can morph, kind of like Chaney could, into almost anything she sets her mind to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I thought Tar was just astounding.
Yeah, what a weird ending.
It was. And I noticed, I don't know if it was cinematography and makeup as well, but her features and her face kind of hardened more and more toward the end of that film.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like you're kind of watching a person literally transform like before your eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It was brilliant.
And I think Kate, if I had to, okay, so aside from Kate, like if you had to name a successor to Hepburn, like someone that captures her spirit and uniqueness in today's world, is there anybody?
I don't think that you can do that with her because she was so, I mean, like we've been saying, she was so herself. Like there is no other Kate. There is no other Katharine Hepburn. She was a one-time deal.
Yeah. And, I was thinking about this the other day on the cemetery tour, how back then, as Gloria Swanson famously said, they had faces then.
Mhm.
Because like, there's no character actor that looks like Peter Lorre, Edward G. Robinson, no actress like Betty Davis, because back then they might not have been super conventionally beautiful people, but you couldn't take your eyes off them. And there was something so incredibly singular about them. And I can't think of any performers today that kind of have that.
Yeah, I think the nature of stardom has changed a lot.
Oh.
Like there's not a need for people to have those kinds of faces. It's kind of enough for people to be on social media a lot, or it's people were myths in the 30s and 40s. The stars were something that were out of reach, and today stars are people who are largely accessible.
And I don't like that. I like the myth, like Garbo, Cheney. I think people liked them more because they were mysterious.
Yeah, I like the myth and then unpacking the myth. Learning about the lives of these people, the lives of Barbara Stanwyck and Betty Davis, and the stars that people loved to watch from afar.
I heard a quote that Denzel Washington told someone about social media. He said, look, if people can follow everything you're doing and look at you Monday through Friday, they're not going to pay to go see you at the theaters on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's actually totally smart. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some stars today, I don't think Emma Stone does social media. I don't think Denzel Washington does. Like, there's certain ones that really embrace it, and there's certain ones that they just want like nothing to do with it. So
yeah. Yeah, I think it's pretty smart, because it can wreck you.
Yeah, and I think it really breaks the myth, and that's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah,
but I'm sure also when people cast movies, it's probably like, oh, how many followers do they have? How many? Because I'm sure especially for actors starting out and actresses, that could even be a casting thing of like, how big of a fan base do they have?
Yeah, followers today, might be what box office receipts were back in the 30s and 40s, right?
Yeah. Well, to a big degree, because with streaming and all these things, you don't have the same metrics. You don't have box office numbers, or you don't have the same kind of way to measure things that they had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, streaming is completely upending the industry.
It really is. I used to work for an agent a long time ago, and basically if a performer's movie opened really big, that Monday morning they'd be on the phone going, look, my guy's movie opened at 50 million. I want a bump for this next movie. I want a bump for the screenwriter. Because whenever you had those numbers, you had a negotiation tactic, so I don't know how people call up and go, oh yeah, their Netflix movie dropped. Like, how do you make the next deal after that? Like, I have no idea how that would work at the moment.
Yeah, I think if we could figure out how that works, or an answer to the streaming problem, we'd all be very rich right now.
Yeah, I mean, gosh.
Yeah.
But let's see if anybody else has any more comments here. It feels good to be back live. I do miss it. Like I said, it's not that I really want to do episodes pre-recorded. It's just everybody's schedule is so crazy. Like when I did the Eddie Muller one recently, we shot that at 9:30 on a Wednesday night because it was the only time he and I could both do it. I mean, it's just, I kind of take what I can get,
It's kind of nice to have it in the evening too.
Yeah, I may just have to, I don't know, start some nighttime ones. It's just everybody's schedule is so wonky. So I'm kind of just catch as catch can these days, because when lockdown was happening, I'm like, every Sunday, and look, like I could be so structured back then, in ways that I can't necessarily be now. So
yeah, Peter says actors have to be conventionally beautiful now to even get an audition.
That's true.
Yeah.
I can't see Edward G. Robinson and Peter Lorre having careers in 2023 the way that they did in 1933.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I can think of the part has to be specifically written for somebody who's not conventionally beautiful in order for somebody to get the audition, I think. I mean, I think that the actress having to be conventionally beautiful thing, I think that was probably the general rule back in the 30s as well. But people like Betty Davis, I don't even want to say, I think Betty Davis was gorgeous.
I do too, but she
But
wasn't like Arlo. I mean, it's a different kind of gorgeous. You know,
yeah, it's like a uniqueness
uniqueness. That's what
that
I
makes her
I'm not-
very attractive.
That's what I'm meaning. Like, I love Eddie G and Peter Lorre, and they were attractive guys, but they were uniquely attractive. They weren't conventionally.
They're interesting to look at.
Yeah, they're interesting, and they have unique features to them.
Yeah.
And that's what made them so caricatured, you know, as well, with the drawings or the cartoons that happened. And yeah.
Right.
And if anyone hasn't read it before, All About Me, Katharine Hepburn's autobiography, is very good. It's a really good read. And they also did a documentary based on it too, which I'm sure that's floating out there on YouTube.
Yeah. The title of Katharine Hepburn's autobiography is Me. It's like, that's just so Katharine Hepburn.
That is very, very true.
Yes.
That is very true. And, you know, as I say often, there's some stars that are just of their time, and there are other stars that are for all time. And Katharine Hepburn truly is for all time.
I agree on that one.
Yes. All right. Anybody else have any questions, comments for us?
Ruth says, I do also. I assume that that's about the Betty Davis being beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think she was beautiful. I totally think that, you know.
Yeah, she didn't think much of herself. I mean, Betty Davis always considered herself not beautiful. And I think that was sort of how she was marketed as well. But I think she was gorgeous.
I do too. I think she didn't fit the standard of beauty that the male executives wanted, because there's the famous story about her hearing someone at Universal say she's as sexy as Slim Somerville, and they just put her down, I think, initially because she wasn't the sexy and beautiful that they had in mind. And when you're young and someone makes negative comments about your looks, that stuff kind of has a way of sticking, and it's really hard to kind of shed that. And so I'm sure that kind of stayed with her. But when you see, I think now Voyager is one of her most gorgeous films in terms of her looks and her beauty in that film. And also Dark Victory. Dark Victory, she lays down on the bed at the end, and that shot is just, she was beautiful, no question.
Yeah. And I think that Betty Davis and Katharine Hepburn, I mean, they were both New Englanders, you know, kind of scrappy New Englanders. I think they had similar approaches to stardom, you know, the sort of no nonsense thing. Even though Betty Davis ended up doing the movies that we talked about earlier, the Guignol stuff, and Katharine Hepburn didn't. I think that that they were both kind of, you know, as I said, no nonsense about their stardom.
They weren't about the work.
Yeah.
They weren't about the premieres. They weren't about the flash. They wanted to turn in great work. Betty, though, loved her Oscars, and she loved that sort of, she cherished.
She did love her Oscars, yes.
Those were on the mantle. I think Catherine's, I don't even know if she probably even knew where they were.
Under the bed.
She's probably like, I have no idea.
Yeah, in the closet somewhere.
Right? Totally. Well, the good news is every year when TCM does their Oscar month, there's always a lot of Katharine, because since she got 12 nominations and 4 wins, every year you can absolutely guarantee there's going to be a very generous helping of her film.
It's like Katharine Hepburn Tribute Month.
Basically, unintentionally, yes, it is. Yes, it is. How could it not be? How could it not be?
Exactly.
All right. Well, this was a fun discussion. And
this was a fun discussion. Thank you for doing this, Carrie. This was really, really wonderful.
It's kind of lifted my spirits. This episode, you guys, came about super last minute. I just sat at my desk and felt sad last night. And I sent Lara a message saying, you want to make Katharine Hepburn's Brownies on camera tomorrow? And she said yes. So I was so glad you did.
Yeah, I mean, I needed a lift to my spirits too, so it was good.
And that's what movies have always done since they were first invented, is take people out of their lives, out of their problems, and take them someplace else, someplace where there's beauty and magic and romance and action, adventure, and a whole other world.
Yeah, and this is what Hollywood Kitchen has done since its beginnings.
I sure tried.
And you've succeeded. I think a lot of people have had their spirits lifted through this program.
Well, thank you guys. And thank you to everybody who's been watching. I'm so grateful. And I do have a Patreon and a buy me a coffee if anybody wants to contribute. All proceeds go to buying ingredients and testing out new recipes. And as always, thank you for being my friend and my partner in crime on a frequent basis.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. It's always lovely to be here.
And please stay tuned for more food, fun, and film history from Hollywood Kitchen.